Finally, there's now an attempt again to get a hold of this administrative state. This is what they are choosing to defend, the right of these agencies to continue operating autonomously and with no democratic accountability, even though they have their tentacles all throughout the world. WikiLeaks did a remarkable and comprehensive investigation of a program that very few people had actually heard of, in which US aid has created a massive coordinated network of media outlets all throughout the world that are designed to falsely appear to be independent, but which in fact are there to disseminate US propaganda, to bring division and discord to all sorts of countries, to enable the United States to exploit the rest of the world for its own ends. And not only is that sinister unto itself and unknown to the public, it's actually something they're quite poor at accomplishing. Here is WikiLeaks on February 8th reporting this, quote, U.S. aid has purchased nearly $500 million, $472.6 million, through a secretive U.S. government-financed NGO called Information Network, IN, which has, quote, worked with 4,291 media outlets, producing in 1 year 4,799 hours of broadcast, reaching up to 778 million people, and, quote, training over 9,000 journalists. This network has also supported social media censorship initiatives. And there you see the graphic, called the Inter-News Network. These always have very generic sounding names, not to raise any alarm, to fly under the radar, for people not to really even notice that they exist. And you can see here in this graphic, it says the recipient is associated with multiple parents in the data set Inter-News Network. And the total awarded amount is $472.6 million from 457 transactions. The WikiLeaks report goes on. Quote, the operation claims offices in over 30 countries, including main offices in the US, London, Paris, and regional headquarters in Kiev, Bangkok, and Nairobi. It is headed up by Jean Bergolt, who pays herself $451,000 a year. Bergolt worked out of the U.S. Embassy in Mexico during the early 1990s, where she was in charge of a $250 million budget and in other revolts or conflicts at critical times before formally rotating out of 6 years at U.S. aid to this network. Her IN bio and those of other key people and board members have been recently scrubbed from the website, but remain accessible at http://archive.org. Reports show the board being co-chaired by Democrat Securocrat Richard J. Kessler and Simone Otis Cox, wife of NVIDIA billionaire Trench Cox, both major Democratic donors. In 2023, supported by Hillary Clinton, Bergolt launched a $10 million IN fund at the Clinton Global Initiative. The IN page shows a picture of Bergolt at the CGI, has also been deleted. And there you see the image. Inter-News launches new $10 million fund supporting independent media at 2023 Clinton Global Initiative. Now, let me just say for a second here. First of all, the fact that we have this gargantuan network of media collectives all throughout the world with such massive funding that essentially nobody has ever heard of, in and of itself demonstrates the reason why these kinds of revelations that are happening only because of this DOGE investigation are so crucial. But does anyone believe that the Clinton Foundation is actually interested in promoting genuinely independent media outlets that are funded by the US government? Obviously, it's an oxymoron for a media outlet to receive funding directly or indirectly from the US government, either straight from the US government or through the Clinton Initiative, and at the same time declare itself to be independent. And yet so much of the reporting has warned in the United States that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are targeting independent journalists and independent media outlets by cutting the budget of US aid, as if a media outlet could possibly be independent if it's receiving money from an arm of the US security state. WikiLeaks goes on, quote, IN has at least 6 captive subsidiaries under unrelated names, including one based out of the Cayman Islands. Since 2008, when electronic records began, more than 95% of IN's budget has been supported by the U.S. government. USAID and state funneled nearly $500 million through this building, which is at 876 7th Street, Arcata, California. The IRS and ING government contracts list this address as the current registered address for IN, although it was clearly abandoned by December 2024. Here's a shot taken 4 months ago, and you can see the building actually shuttered. So just that fact alone, that the United States government has been building and constructing and proliferating and financing the Internews network that has tentacles all over the world, some of which are administered through the Clinton Foundation, others of which are just directly funded by the U.S. government, for me, in and of itself, makes what the Trump administration is doing and digging into these agencies sufficiently valuable to justify. But there's so much more to it. Here's from ProPublica in 2024. There you see Internews Network designated as a 501c3, and you see the text of the IRS document. And here is the report showing that it had $124 million in revenue in 2023, total assets of $32.8 million, and expenses of $123 million. So it's spending all of the money that it's taking in on this propaganda effort on behalf of the U.S. government in countries all throughout the world. And you can see there not just the amount itself, but you can see the trend lines here of how this budget has gone up in the last 10 years. It's kind of a straight up curve. It started at around $50 million, then it went to $100 million, now it's at $124 million. So that's one of the other aspects of these sorts of opaque institutions that nobody pays attention to, nobody really understands what's going on in them. They operate as their own independent entities, is that they constantly just grow through sheer inertia without really much of any controls taking place. And this was one of the central themes of the Trump campaign, which I think the people surrounding Donald Trump learned more than anything else after his first term, which is that there's this entire deep state, this entire administrative state that operates unto itself with no democratic accountability. They believe they run themselves. They believe they have their own rules. And that's why there's so much angst and upset and anger that we've seen when elected officials from the executive branch, we just had a major national election. It lasted 2 years. Billions and billions of dollars spent on this election. Donald Trump wins. He brings in his team into the White House, into the administration and the executive branch. He deploys the people he's asked to perform these functions that he said he would carry out. And the reaction of these agencies are, who are you to come and supervise what we're doing, to try and control what we're doing? You don't run us. And it's true. The political branches have not run these agencies. They run themselves. That's what a deep state is. That's what an administrative state is. And it's an incredibly anti-democratic component of our government. They operate with no transparency, no accountability, no supervision. And this is the first time, I guess you could go back to the Church Committee when the Senate finally investigated a lot of what was going on. When in the 60s and 70s, so many of the abuses came to the fore, and the Senate decided it needed to find out what these agencies are doing. That's 50 years ago, 45 years ago. So finally, there's now an attempt again to get a hold of this administrative state, and it's the Democratic Party that, among all the things Trump is doing, apparently found the most passion to oppose. They actually went to the USAID building and shook their canes that old people carry, that so many of the Democratic members of Congress carry because of how elderly they are, how long they've been around. And Chuck Schumer led a chant outside of it. This is what they are choosing to defend the right of these agencies to continue operating autonomously and with no democratic accountability, even though they have their tentacles all throughout the world.